Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very, very well. How are you doing? How are things? I hope they are treating you well. I am back today with an episode that I hope you aren't feeling like, but if you are, I'm giving you a hug. And I've also got some really practical things for you to think about and to do. And hopefully, this will accompany you if you are feeling this way for you to kind of move forward from, because I don't want you to feel alone, because you are not alone. Like, this happens all the time. So the topic in question is around what to do if you're feeling lost, you're feeling conflicted in your next steps, you feel like I just don't even know what I'm doing anymore. We all get there, right? It's not unusual. You just often don't hear people talk about it. But what do you do when you've got this just gap and you're thinking, oh goodness me, I just don't know what to do? Maybe you've got a big team, maybe you feel like you have no leeway because you're so contracted to do X, Y, and Z thing, and you've got this person relying on you, an X person, and it all just feels too much. And maybe that might be that you emotionally express that. You might cry if you're someone who that is works for you. You might feel like you want to scream, you might be angry, you might feel disappointed, you might be putting pressure on yourself to figure it out. There's a whole range of emotions that you might feel towards this. And I want to just break some of that down with you today and think about what you can do if you're in this situation. Because it's an uncomfortable one, and it's a one that no one likes to be in. And it can feel so disruptive, and it can feel so agitating, and it can be very uncomfortable. It can be very worrying. So, first up, just want to say it's okay. Yeah, it's okay and 100% normal to feel like this. You don't have to be motivated all of the time. It isn't possible to be motivated 100% of the time. It isn't possible to have clarity 100% of the time. It's completely human nature to go through phases of feeling very clear and then sometimes feeling like, oh, I just don't know if this is right, and having those worries. So that is really normal. The other thing to remember is this will not last forever. You won't feel like this forever. And I know that doesn't help at the moment. I know it just, you're like, oh, I don't care, me. But it will not last forever. However, what will last forever, potentially, is how you approach this and what you do from this. And that is why it is really important to me that you don't take too many drastic actions when you feel like this. Because what happens often is when people feel like this, and if it's for a prolonged period of time, people start to believe things that their sort of mind and their brain is saying to them. They may make decisions based on a set of parameters that is not necessarily 100% true, and they can end up having to sort of unwind a lot of things after they don't feel like this anymore, and their headspace is in a different position and they can think about things slightly differently. So, diving into this topic, one of the biggest things I can recommend to you if you're in this position is that you don't start comparing yourself to other people. When we are in this state of feeling a bit lost and we're feeling conflicted and we're like, oh, I just don't know what to do. Should the business pivot? Should it change? Is this right? Is it not right? If you compare yourself, you're not in the mind space to be comparing yourself objectively. Therefore, you will rip yourself apart. You will find all the reasons under the sun as to why you're not as good as X, Y, and Z. It's just not a good option. So please don't do it. What I would instead invite you to do, and I think this is really exciting, is get inquisitive and think bigger. Like, turn this around and be like, how can I be inquisitive as to what would I like to do? Or where's my vision kind of stunted? Where do I need to think bigger? Because sometimes people feel lost and conflicted because the vision's completely gone. Maybe something's failed in the business. Maybe you feel like you were going after something and now you've realized they actually don't even want to do that anymore. And so the vision can kind of be really stumped and you're like, oh, and there's like no desire. Maybe the vision's completely gone. Maybe you're normally someone who can see the like next steps and the road path, and then you're like, oh, I just don't even know what we're doing anymore. Getting inquisitive and thinking about what is out there, what's out there in the world, what would I love to do, what is something that I could look at and think, I really appreciate that. How can you think bigger is something I really encourage people to do. A question I would like you to ask yourself if you're in this position is, why are you feeling lost? That is really important, okay? Why are you feeling lost? Because there's often a few reasons for that. Like, are you bored? Some people are just bored with their business. They're like, this is bloody boring. Is it time for a change? Like, maybe it's time for something new. Is it that you're feeling lost because actually you've achieved what it is that you set out to do and have realized that it's not making you happy? Or that you're now like, I don't know what's next, or this hasn't planned out, like, this hasn't resulted in what I thought was going to be. A lot of people can do that. They'll get to achieving their goal and then realize and think, this isn't actually what I was hoping for. This doesn't feel like I thought it was going to, which is why visualization is really important. So is there some kind of change needs to happen there? Like, are you ready for a different challenge? Maybe it's just that you're a bit like, I've done this now, I've done this for 5 years, I've done this for 10 years, I've done this for 20 years. I'm ready for a change. I'm ready for something new. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's totally okay if you're in that space. The other thing to think about is what is happening outside of business in your career? Can that explain it? And the reason I say that is because I don't want to give a number, but 60 to 70% of the time, when people are feeling lost and they're feeling conflicted and they're feeling very like uncertain, often it is a side effect of something else that is happening in their life. It's just that, you know, as human beings, we can only hold so much. And so if something in your life has changed and something is, you know, maybe needing your time or is maybe taking up emotional capacity inside of you, you can then find that your business and your career, like all of a sudden the lights just switched off and you're like, I just can't do this anymore, or I'm not even bothered, or I don't really care. And like, that can be such a hard feeling, but often we don't connect the two. It's really difficult for us to connect the two because we will look at things in silos and say, well, the reason that I'm not interested in my business must be something to do with the business. But what I'm inviting you to think about is there things happening outside of your business and career and outside of like what usually goes on in your life that might potentially explain why there's been a shift in you? You don't need to know the scientific reason. You don't need to know, like, oh, it's definitely because of this. I'm just suggesting I have a think about what might be going on that could explain this. On a practical note, if you are in this stage of like feeling lost and conflicted, you need to ask yourself, can you buy yourself time? So, depending on where you're at in business, this is going to mean completely different things to you. For some of you, you will be able to coast along for a couple of months without massive issues happening to your business because you might have gotten to a stage of stabilization, or you might be at a point where you've got enough team to support you, or you might have enough revenue coming in where actually you might not grow, but you can stabilize for a certain period of time. Can you buy yourself some time to just live and to enjoy life and to just keep going with whatever it is that you are trying to do whilst you figure out what is going on? And then, if you can do that, great. If you can't, I want you to think about it's almost like, what is the MVP? So what is your minimal viable situation that you can run on that will buy you some time? Because what you don't want to be doing is making like massive changes. Like, don't make any massive business changes, in my opinion, if you have just felt like this and you're now like in panic mode. Because often what you think today will not be what you think in 2 weeks' time. So thinking about where can you sort of slightly move things, where can you buy yourself some time to just ride out this period or ride out this wave. And for some of you, that's going to be hours. Some of you, it'll be days. Some of you might be in a really life-changing situation where this might be weeks or years or months. But try not to judge yourself is really important if you're in this phase of business. What I would also say is, from a practical perspective, if you are at a point where you're thinking, I am bored, or you're sat there thinking, I just don't have the same get up and go as I did, or I just don't feel that like oomph or that desire to go out and get new business, and you know, because it wears off, right? Let's be honest, it wears off. If that is you, I want you to go and think bigger and look at what is on your 10, 20, 15, your career vision board. Like, what's on your professional vision board that you're like, I'd love to achieve that in my lifetime, or I'd love to make that happen, or I'd love to go into this area, or I'd love to retrain into this. Like, what is on your career vision board? does that give you any signs for what you want to focus on next? Because often it does. Often people are like, and they'll say this to me, so it's okay if you're like, well, it's not going to happen and I can't make this happen, but eventually I would like to do X, Y, and Z thing. It's like, open a retreat business or retrain as a social worker, or like they'll have something and they're like, but obviously I won't make it happen, but here's the thing. And that can be really interesting because it's like, okay, well, what is it about that that's exciting to you? And we can unpick a lot of things when we start digging deeper into what can our vision be? What is it that we actually want? It's not me saying that you're going to miraculously just give everything up and become, retrain as a social worker. For some people, that might be the answer, but often it's not. It's about what is it that's exciting to you about that specific role? Or what is it that gets you energized from that piece that's on the vision board? Sometimes it can be something that's really clear, like they want to win a certain award. So then you can be like, right, okay, well, how are we going to position the business so that we would do that? And they can come up with a real tangible plan that is actually linked to that. What this all requires, though, of you is for you to give yourself permission to change and giving yourself permission to kind of start over. So if you're someone who does want to switch niches or you want to completely change what you do, as much as I'm saying don't do that in the first day, maybe you get to a point where you're like, do you know what, actually, I think this is the right thing for me to do. And I think it is time for me to make this happen. If that is the case, then giving yourself permission to do that without judgment is going to be really important. But what I would say is get really clear on what the change is. Because what you need to understand is what is a change and then what is a tweak/shift. Those two things are very different. And often people don't establish the two, and therefore their actions negatively impact them. If they don't correctly identify the two. So what is a change and what is a tweak/shift? The reason I say this is because if you're doing a tweak/shift, that's something I'd more recommend you do as a viable option because it means that you can test things. If you're making a change, often that requires a lot of energy. And for some people, when they're in this mode, they're saying to me, I've got no energy. So then when they're suggesting a change, I'm saying, well, hang on a minute. Have you got the energetic capacity to do that? And often the answer is no. A shift/a tweak is something that you can probably do rather easily and simply, which is something that is worth giving a go. Again, you might be at a point where you're lost and you're feeling conflicted, but you are really energized. And if that's the case, go for it. Good for you. Like, make that change and get really clear on it. But for a lot of people, if you're in the kind of like, I'm lost, I'm feeling frustrated, and I don't know what on earth's going on, often that can be accompanied with a low energy kind of, feeling versus a high energy feeling like, yeah, this is really great. Depending on which side of the scale you're on is going to dictate which would be the right option for you to look at. If this is something that is sounding like you, and you're also someone who's saying, the reason I've got into this place in the first, like how I've gotten here, is because the business is not set up to work correctly, that is where I would suggest you get help and support. So some people will fall into this bucket and they feel lost and they feel conflicted because they've actually realized that their business design isn't correct and that the structure of the business and their business model and what they're trying to build is not sustainable and cannot work long term. If that is you, then doing some work with someone like me makes total sense. You might want to book a strategy day, you might want to have a half day, like that sort of thing can work. But that is for people who have realized and have gotten to this point because they're like, yeah, we need to pivot or something's happened in my life and I need to change up what I've got going on. And if that's you, then that's where doing a piece of work around how do we make it more sustainable or how can we make the business work would make sense. And that's a very fine line that I'm always trying to establish with people, especially if they come and they say, it's time for a pivot, it's time for a change, it's time for movement. I'm like, okay, where are you sat on that scale that we've been discussing? Because it's really important to kind of figure that out for people. The final thing I want to leave you on, and this episode has been short and sweet because I really want to just get to the point of like understanding that, well, let's just recap actually. The recap is don't compare yourself. figure out why you're feeling lost. Are you bored? Do you need change? What's happening outside of your business, career? Can you buy yourself time? And then also thinking bigger. I want you to look bigger. I want you to vision board. I want you to think about, what do you want to achieve in your lifetime? What does that mean for you now? How far are you from that? And that will breed energy into you a lot of the time when you start thinking about, what would you like to do in the future? Get really clear on, what is a change, what is a shift, what is a tweak. And then the final point I want to leave you on today is, do not fall into the trap of listening to other people in your industry. So often when we're feeling a bit down and where it's kind of similar to the comparison stuff, we will then turn to other people we know of or that we want to kind of look up to, and we will start comparing ourselves. But what I don't want you to do is to look at seeking out similar situations, because this is what the brain does. We start looking for, well, how can we find evidence that how I'm feeling is true? Or how can we find evidence that X, Y, and Z thing is possible? So they then go and start looking. Now, that's great if it's a positive thing. But for a lot of people, if you're in that state, it's not going to be. It's going to be like, let's go and try and find more evidence that everybody's business is struggling and everybody's, having to fight for these small group of clients, or everybody's suffering from not making sales, or this isn't working in anybody's business. And you will, if you look for that evidence, you're going to find it. Yeah, like you're 100% will find whatever it is that you're looking for, because you put your blinkers on and you will, it's like yellow car theory, you just will find it. That does not help you, and it does not work, because for as much as you see whatever it is that you're trying to prove for yourself, you're also bypassing a whole load of other opportunities, other people who are showing you that that's completely untrue and is showing duality. And you have to remember that duality exists when you're in this state. So when you're in this lost state and you're thinking, oh, this is really bad and this is really difficult, if you aren't actively trying to find people who are winning and who are doing amazing things and who are having the opposite time to maybe how you're feeling, you will then believe that everybody's having a shit time. And that is just not true. And you must remember that. Because if not, you will fall into a very negative trap that you can last in for years and years and years. And I have seen this play out where people have said, I shouldn't have let this go on for so long, or this has actually really impacted my business for years and years and years because I allowed myself to get entertained and to fall into the trap that everybody else was kind of buying into and putting their opinion in. And instead of putting my blinkers on and actually focusing on the positives and looking at, what do I want my life to be and what do I want my business and career to be, you fell into this like pity party vibe. They regret that. Don't be one of those people. I hope that you take care of yourself, look after yourself, give yourself grace, but also make sure you pull yourself out of the other end and say, no, what do I want this to be? What do I want my life to be? What do I want my business to be? And change is okay. Change is what's needed, and you need to pivot and you want to do something completely different and you want to start a new business. Good for you. That's fine. But make sure that that's coming from the right place and not coming from a place of scarcity, insecurity, worry, and just boredom. It's really important that you make the decision that is right for you and your business. I will be back next week with another episode. Take care. Enjoy the short and sweet episode. Go and have a listen back to some of the other episodes as well. We have over 100 episodes now, potentially soon. If not, if it's not yet, it'll be soon. And take care. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.